Um, so I thought today we would talk about uh, how essentially we can create effective time management in our routines. Uh, in the last week, many people are starting new jobs, people moving to the city, people are beginning their undergrad, graduate careers. So many different things that are creating change and fluctuation, as well as people who are not new to the city, but people who have been here for some time. And they're now in a space where things are just catching up. And it feels like they don't know how to necessarily maneuver. There's a feeling of just kind of overwhelming anxiety. Both scenarios create an insight into an absence of just structure in one's routine. Right? The number of people have said to me in the last week, I don't know how to pray my prayers and go to work and be in class. It's not that I don't want to pray them. I just fundamentally don't know how to keep up with things. I don't know how I'm supposed to make time to exercise, make time to study, to make times to socialize, to make time for my own self care, my personal development, my spiritual development. And so we want to be able to tap into this because this is a fundamental part of our tradition, right? A recognition of both how we understand time conceptually, but more importantly, how we can harness a relationship with it so that we're able to yield not productivity in a workplace or successes that are purely rooted in materialistic gain, but so that you can have balance, right? So you can have fulfillment. You don't want to feel miserable throughout the course of your days. You don't want to feel like you're running on empty. You don't want to be in a place where everything is just overtly stressful. An absence of structure becomes really easy to fall into, especially now when there's individual moments to determine for yourself how you are going to choose to utilize the minutes of the hours of the days that you've been allocated. And so, hopefully, by the end of this conversation, we're going to be able to have some working structure individually. And then, what I would recommend, just as people might be coming in and out, if you need help individually to create some kind of structure to your routines, we can sit one on one and figure that out. My goal is to not get you to understand the purpose of having some semblance of routine to only be to have success in terms of things that are part of the dunya. It's not that I want you to fail everything and that that's an unimportant part, but it's not the only part. It's not the absolute part. That your professional ambition is not what creates an equal sign to you. You are much bigger than just worldly ambition. There's so much else that goes into it. We don't always have to necessarily compromise on certain things. I want to also give you some context into some of what it is that I would bring into this conversation. Aside from what I do here at the university as a chaplain, as a professor, as the director of the Islamic Center, I also have two beautiful kids that I love very much, that I get to spend a lot of time with and actually enjoy spending time with. I hang out with my wife, their mother, who I also fall more in love with every day. I have two parents who are elderly. They are not physically well. May Allah grant them shifa and healing. I have two siblings. I run a few businesses. I sit on the board of some nonprofits. I travel for both work, humanitarian purposes. This laundry list is not to say to you that these are all the things I do, that's success, but it's to say if anybody can make a claim of being busy and not having enough time, there's likely a lot that you do. You don't do as many things as I do necessarily. We do things differently, but I still take time to take care of myself. I still have moments where I can hang out with my friends. I have opportunities where I can play games with my kids. It's not an either or, it's a both and. And we want to be able to recognize what it is that we're pursuing here as a goal so that it's not then taken just purely abstractly or theoretically, but you actively implement what it is that we're going to discuss. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. A principle that you want to draw from this is that there's a reason why there are thousands of self development texts written on a regular basis. And people give the same talks and same lectures again and again and take a lot of money from a lot of people about fundamental subjects rooted in self help because there are so many people who need it, but there are then just handfuls of people that actually execute upon it. This is not a tradition that's rooted in the idea that you make dua to Allah every day in Surah Fatiha saying, Ihdina sirat al-mustaqim, that guide me to the straight path, just so you know exists, but you ask for it not just for consciousness of it, but so that you can actually walk it and traverse it. You see the distinction? The idea is to not just know something and then, oh, I know it, but to know it so that you do something with it. You can't have this conversation if what you take, you don't sit and try to strategize on how you execute upon it. Gradually, not in haste, not in kind of a haphazard way, running around, but just gradually, with patience. Try to figure out, I want to get to a certain place. How do I do that so it's sustainable? Other things that we're going to discuss that you're going to have to be open to individually is confronting parts of yourself so that you're able to acknowledge what it is that you do to choose how you fundamentally use your time. Because when a lot of people say, I don't have time, and we're going to talk about this probably more in 20 minutes, really what you're basically saying to yourself is it's not important to me. Or you're saying I don't have time as a way to make yourself feel better for missing out on something that you know is important. So I have to tell myself again and again, I don't have time to be able to justify the fact that I'm not watching my kids do something at their school. I have to tell myself I don't have time to be able to justify and validate not working on relationships, not spending deliberate time on certain things. When I can tell myself I don't have time, it's easy for me to say that as opposed to telling myself that, hey, you're making a choice that is terrible. That you actually should be going out of your way to ensure that you are calling a loved one on a regular basis. That there shouldn't be somebody else that's telling you down the line as to how great it was for them to teach your kids how to pray. You should be teaching them. There's times I've sat down and literally seen my now 7-year-old and my 9-year-old, who's going to be 10 soon, do all kinds of ridiculous things on a stage in their school, which I sit and wonder, what is it that you're really learning in this place? Hearing them sing off key, watching them do random stuff with their friends on these things, none of it is anything other than I don't want anybody else to do things that I'm blessed to do. Nobody else is going to be my child's father. Just like nobody else is going to be my wife's husband. There's certain roles that I'm uniquely blessed to embrace, but I have to understand that when I say I don't have time, I'm either saying it's not important to me or I'm trying to make myself feel better about something that I know I shouldn't be turning my back on. You get what I'm saying? And why I say that is because this is not meant to be something that is super easy. What is easy is to lack structure. What is easy is to just kind of go with the flow and not have strategy. What's easy is to just let the nafs be what is sovereign. What is difficult is to have consciousness and presence and mindfulness and all these other words that get thrown at you. It's not easier, but being easy doesn't mean that it's better. Because you don't want to get stuck in a place where now months down the line, it's time to do a final exam. And you are cramming because you didn't prep in advance. You don't want to be in a place where there's a presentation, an interview, some kind of thing that's going on, and you keep pushing towards just the immediate satisfaction of things and not a long-term foresight. It's going to be an uncomfortable conversation if you're not comfortable confronting parts of yourself. So don't make that mistake. You're not in a competition with anybody. You're not in a place where you have to feel bad. You can't go back and change what yesterday looked like, but you can take what you learned from yesterday in order to then understand, how do I want to let tomorrow be a little bit more fulfilling? Do you get what I'm saying? So these are two things that we want to be able to address as we are engaging in this conversation. I don't want you to be in a place where down the line your eating habits get terrible, your sleeping habits are non existent, you don't have depth to relationships and friendships. Everything is just purely in pursuit of what a formulaic understanding of success looks like. And then when the world becomes heavy, it knocks you down even harder than it needed to because you weren't anticipating any semblance of real self care, wellness, strategic development in your routine that understands you have a physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual sphere. Does this make sense? So you just start gradually in certain ways. Some of the things that we talk about are going to be a little more abstract. Some of them are going to be very specific and particular. So in the course of this conversation, I am going to tell you that you should wake up to pray Fajr. You should sleep in a way that allows for you to wake up early enough to pray Fajr, and then you should stay awake after you have prayed Fajr. Because most people who have worldly success, they are the top thinkers, intellectuals, innovators. They are successful in any place. They wake up early in the day. And most people who have spiritual success, they're not sleeping through their prayer. And most people that have a combination of those successes, they don't wake up to go to sleep. They wake up to stay up. So when I can get up at 5 something in the morning and go through a certain routine and get accomplished more in the first 3 or 4 hours of the day before most people are even awake, then it's easier for me to sit down and listen to my son tell me all kinds of random things that he thinks he's learned about life while he's eating Cheerios for 45 minutes. I don't have to stress. I might have to go to bed by 9:30 or 10, but that's okay, because I would rather spend moments with people like you that I'm fully present and that I love and create memories than stay awake till 2 o'clock in the morning doing something that I'm definitely not going to remember in the next month of my life. So it's going to be something where you have to confront parts of yourself. Do you get what I mean? And preemptively, we deal with what the end consequence is by not letting it exist that says, I feel like I'm drowning. I feel like I don't know where to go. Everything is overwhelming. I don't feel like I'm able to do anything successfully. No, you have the tools and the skills. You have innate beauty. This is what Allah has created us with. You have aql. He gave you intellectual capacity. You have the ability to choose your choices. Choose them from the best parts of yourself. Does that make sense? Okay. So some things that we want to start to go through and recognize. There's a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ, he says, لا تقوم الساعة حتى يتقارب الزمان. That the hour will not commence, right? Kind of apocalyptic, eschatological genres of hadith that talk about the end of time. So towards the end of time, this hadith says, there will be a shrinking of time, right? That time will literally shrinking. There's 3 opinions that are given on this. One, that there will actually be a literal shrinking. A 24-hour day is now going to be 23 hours and 59 minutes. A second interpretation of this is that what would usually take longer amounts of time will be shorter, right? Like travel doesn't take as long as it used to 1400 years ago. Sending a letter. You can literally right now send actual messages to people all over the world instantaneously. That wasn't the case always. So literal acts are now done in lesser amounts of time by virtue of just technological advancement. And then the third, which is going to be most relevant to this conversation, is that there becomes a decreasing of barakah. Blessing starts to become devoid in our time. And if we want to utilize a baseline definition of barakah, then the baseline definition that we want to use is the ability to do more in less amounts of time. It's not a productivity that yields an output that's purely just about worldly things, but the opportunity to render a distinct efficiency metaphysically that then impacts the rest of your outputs in certain meaningful ways. It doesn't take as much energy. It's not as exhausting. It's not as overwhelming and overbearing. The opportunity to start to engage in some of these things. So we're going to look at that. We're going to look at a spiritual concept that's called muhasabah, taking inventory of yourself. That you are going to begin and end days with an opportunity to just think, what did this day really bring to me? What do I want it to bring to me? Moments of stillness will become important. We're going to talk about some other things that we can categorize, because most of us don't do terrible things, right? None of you, God forbid, committed like any kind. You didn't carjack a cab driver on your way to this halakha. You know what I mean? You didn't see some guy, he was just trying to pray asr on the hood of his taxi, and you went in and stole all the money out of his car. No, you're not bad people. Most of what we do does not exist in the prism of what's called shar, or things that are like evil, like bad things, right? May Allah protect us from it. We also do a lot of things that are khayr, like good. It's harder at times to admit the good things that we do. If I ask most of you to tell me 5 beautiful things about yourselves, most of you probably wouldn't be able to do it. Which is not arrogance. It's confidence. That's why you want to come to spaces like this, be around people like you're seated with, so that they can help you to see yourself the way Allah sees you. You can see your goodness, and you can embrace your own light and your own beauty, inward and outward. But we'll talk about a concept that's called lahu, that is neither khair nor shar. It's just futile. There's no benefit to it. There's no detriment caused or no gains yielded. It's just pointless. And things just kind of go pointless, mindless. There's no presence to them. And then by the end of it, creating a strategy that says, well, how do we start to engage some of this for ourselves individually? Okay. So what I want to start with is understanding and addressing a certain elasticity that exists to time. And our ability to break down this notion that says we don't actually have enough of it. I don't have enough time. What do I mean by elasticity, right? If one of you lost your Wi-Fi in your room, your toilet broke, you had to have a plumber come, and that plumber came and said, I'm going to come to your house, but I'm going to come sometime tomorrow between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. You would somehow find the hours to sit and wait for that person to come and repair it. Where did those hours come from all of a sudden? How are you able to somehow magically, in the middle of your week, sit in your house for 8 hours straight, waiting for somebody to come and fix the internet? But at every other juncture, it's something that I'm not able to do this because I don't have the time. I don't have the time to exercise. I don't have the time to read. I don't have the time to spend with my friends. I don't have the time to call family. I don't have the time to sleep 7 or 8 hours a night. I don't have the time to eat well. I don't have the time to do any of these things. My father and my mother went on a trip with me to Canada where I was speaking at a conference probably about 6 years ago. And in the nature of the work that I was doing, nobody really was there to for me to follow a precedent off of. When I started working here when I was 22, I was trying to figure out a lot of it on my own. And one of the things that I did not do so much was really spend time with my family. And 6 years ago, my mother and father came with me on this trip that we spent like a week together. It was amazing. Breakfast every morning, lunch and dinner together. They sat and listened to me in this conference. We got to go around Canada. And at the end of it, we landed in New York. And my father, he at the airport gave me a big hug, kissed me on my head, and he said, "This is honestly one of the best times I've ever had in my life." A week later, my father had a stroke that left him paralyzed on the right side of his body and without the ability to speak. Since that time, I was on my way to Florida to speak at something. I got off the plane. I had some people that picked me up, really nice people. We went to a restaurant to get breakfast. I went to the restroom to freshen up. When I came back, my phone had about 20 or 30 missed calls on it. And it was my brother, my sister in law, and my sister. My sister called next. I picked up the phone. She said they found dad collapsed on the parking lot of his medical office. He's in the hospital. He had a bad stroke. I now went back to the airport, caught the next flight that I could, flew to JFK. A friend of mine picked me up, drove me to LaGuardia, where I had parked my car. I got in my car, drove to New Jersey to the hospital. That entire time took about 6, 7 hours from the time I got the news to when I was in New Jersey. My whole family was now there. My wife and my kids were already there. Everybody was there. And then I spent the next month just sitting in this hospital in New Jersey. Where did that month come from all of a sudden? Where I couldn't go probably longer than a day staying in my parents' house, the house that I grew up in New Jersey. And every which way, the same community that you are a part of right now, even then, pre COVID, was that much more at full momentum. And I sat in this hospital for a whole month. Didn't really do anything other than just be with my father. Well, I'm so grateful that before he lost his ability to speak, one of the last things I heard him say to me was that he loved me. And it wasn't the only time he said it, but it was one of the last moments. And that we made time for that trip. And we did all of those things. But nothing stopped here. You literally are sitting in a room that still exists. It didn't disappear because I was sitting someplace else. Jummah still happens, Iftar still happens, Ramadan still happens, fundraising still happens, people still live their lives. What was it that was getting in the way? You don't want something like that to be what gives you an insight that you actually have more time than you realize. And that you can do a lot more things that you allow for yourself to anticipate. But the things that are getting in the way, the things that become problematic, they are not always necessarily the things that we want to prioritize. You get what I mean? Does that make sense? If you do not design your life, someone else is going to design it for you. And they're not going to design it for you in a way that necessarily takes into consideration what it is that you fully need. It's not a good thing that corporations and companies will build daycare facilities there so that you can bring your kids. You don't have to be attached to this 24/7 when you go into a work mode. You don't have to live and breathe every single moment of your life in pursuit of things that are materialistic. But if you are not consciously bringing now things into your life that you want to prioritize, why would anybody not take advantage of the fact that if you don't see the value in your time, they're going to take it because they see the value in your time. And they're going to make you spend your days the way that is advantageous for them. Do you get what I mean? So you design your life or somebody else is going to design it for you. Now, I want you to think about this right now in terms of what it is that you feel like are priorities in your life. Turn to the person next to you, right? We do a lot of discussions in these halakas, ideally in pairs. Why is it so hard for us to build a routine? What gets in the way when we want to try to put certain things into practice? We want to try to prioritize certain things. What are some of the things that make that difficult? Do you understand the question? Okay. So if you can turn to the person next to you, ideally in pairs, so everyone's talking, right? There's not a right or wrong answer here. You just want to let us benefit from your insights and perspectives. So, what makes it hard? What makes it difficult? And then we'll come back and start to discuss. Now, I want you to talk about what do you feel like are things you should be prioritizing, right? Things that ideally should be priorities in your day, your week, your month. What are some of those things that should be prioritized by me individually? You can talk about that stuff. The second question was, what are some of the things we should be prioritizing? Yeah, I'm gonna use the whiteboard. So okay. So in either of these boxes now, like what gets in the way and priorities? What are some of the things that we talked about? Either one. Yeah. Who is talking? Yeah.
I was just saying, like, the job, like, working.
Is what?
It gets in the way.
Gets in the way?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Job. What else?
We feel laziness and lack of sleep.
Lack of sleep.
Boredom.
Boredom?
Lack of motivation, lack of discipline.
Anyone else? Lack of organization.
Other people's needs.
Social media.
Spontaneous.
What did you say? Spontaneous?
Yeah. That's the word.
Just spontaneity?
Yeah. Bigger word.
Okay. What else? What about priorities? What are things we should be putting into practice?
Job.
Huh?
Job.
Job.
Yeah.
Yeah. What else? Salah. Prayer.
And health.
Health.
Relationships. Sleep.
What else?
Your personal goals and outside of work.
Family, but I think it's relationship.
Family. Anything else?
Charity.
What else?
Some people will say gym.
The gym.
Hobbies. Maybe being present.
Okay. Anything interesting that we see in these two lists? Yeah.
It's kind of like like the absence of one with the presence of the other. If you cut this, you can have this. In some cases.
Yeah. That's a good point. What else?
Oh, we also see some of the same things in different boxes. Like
Yeah. Anything else? Yeah.
A lot of what gets in the way comes from yourself. It's like your own mindset.
So why? Why do we do that? You likely, if it's not yourself, know a lot of people who do more of this than this. Why? This is like an important thing because it's going to become the crux of it all, right? For you to determine for yourself, why do you do what you do in the first place? You know, I know why I get up every day. Like, why are you getting up every day? What is it that you're trying to get done that says some of this is more important than some of these things? We don't have to have it be an either or. It could be a both and, but we want to deconstruct first to be able to gain some insight. So why are more people in this place? Why do you think? Yeah.
because it's easier.
Because it's easier? It's easier to have a lack of sleep. It's pretty miserable when you have a lack of sleep, right? You know, think deeply about what it is that some of these things are rooted in. They are easy to read, right? Like that's a part of it. What else?
Addiction.
Addiction?
Like if you're addicted to like social media, wasting your time, or staying up all night watching movies instead of sleeping.
An addiction is like a deeply entrenched behavior, right? And we can talk about addictions too. They're different from habits. We are very subservient to language, so language becomes important. But that could be a part of it. Habit, addiction. What else? Yeah.
This side is more instant gratification, and this side is more delayed gratification.
Instant gratification, delayed gratification. Yeah, amazing. What else?
Priorities are more intentional.
More intentional. Can you flesh that out a little bit more?
Yeah, so like if I'm looking at the left side, I'm thinking I'm more passive, if I lack organization, honestly, and I'm not really like thinking about what I'm doing, versus if I'm focusing on my priorities, I'm like coming about it.
Yeah. What else? Somebody had their hand raised here. One person, right? No? I'm not just seeing things. Anybody else? Yeah.
One side is more being more proactive, whereas I definitely like that. One side being more passive, and one side being proactive.
This mutes potentially what it is that makes you uniquely human. This part right here necessitates you tapping deliberately into your heart and your mind. You can be in a place where it creates ease, but fundamentally, you have to deduce for yourself, what is the point of all of this to begin with? I'm not 10 years old anymore. I have to determine for myself, why am I choosing to use my time in the way that I do already? It's not about living like a, boring life, a life without fun and love and meaning and that kind of stuff. But what are you working towards? Much of this stems from this being what the whole point of everything is. If you believe the point of your existence is simply to get a job, get married, have some babies, that's life, and that's it. If you believe success is purely rooted in the physicality of things, or if you can determine for yourself with individual conviction, do I have an understanding of what it is that really yields contentment? And do I have a prioritization of myself in pursuit of something that is bigger than just constructs of validation rooted in a dunyawi sense, a worldly sense of what makes somebody good? And what you're choosing between ends up being fleeting moments of happiness versus real contentment. What you're choosing between is a sense of recognizing what the point of this world is, and is it an ends or a means to something bigger? If you went through your daily routine, you can learn about yourself through yourself. So we have a literal hadith that says the two sunnahs of Fajr, they're worth the whole world and everything in it. It's not just like the world in this, like the whole world and everything in it means whenever you play these two sunnahs, what's going into your account is everything in the world. Every bank filled with every vault of money in abundance, homes and houses and materialistic wealth, anything that you can think of in terms of value that exists in the world. Just these two cycles of prayer are worth that entire world and everything in it. You want to demonstrate for yourself a recognition. If one arguably doesn't have the information, that's fine. You don't know what you don't know. But when you do know it, and you still act contrary to it, it's not a Sunday school experience. You got to think to yourself, what are my actual priorities based off of how I choose to live my life? If I really believe that this is what the prophet says that it is, why am I staying awake till a time that doesn't even allow for me to meet this as something that I can get done? It takes 2 minutes, not even, to do, right? But fundamentally, all of this is rooted in your individual perspective. Nobody is going to be able to tell you what's important to you other than you. And embedded in this conversation is not just ritual as a practice alone, but fundamentally, the most important thing is that you got to be taking care of yourself. And all of this is built to make you run on empty, to be exhausted, to be stressed, to be bitter, resentful, being in a place where the world's heaviness feels more heavy. It doesn't have to be because I want to take care of somebody else, or I want to do this, or I want to do that. Your heart is precious. And what we find in here, look at this, food and sleep. Why do you not eat well and sleep well? Like, really? What is it at the end that you are giving up more broadly in exchange for what? And you sit down for a minute and then you think about it. This is what happens when somebody else designs your life. If you don't design your life, someone else is going to design it for you. You're going to be in a place where there's going to be temporary yields of satisfaction, which you're going to miss out on the opportunities to find beauty in things. Isa alayhi salam, Jesus, peace be upon him, the son of Mary, peace be upon her. We have the hadith in our tradition where Isa alayhi salam is with the disciples and they come upon the carcass of a donkey. And everybody's talking about how putrid it smells and flies all around it. It's a carcass of a dead animal. Jesus, peace be upon him, looks at it and says, look at how beautiful its teeth are. He's able to still find beauty in what everybody else sees as being just atrocious. That's why you want to be able to prioritize some of these things with intentionality. To be able to not recognize certain things as burdensome obligations, but seeing them as vehicles that allow for an enhancement of your experience so that you can have deeper relationships with the people that you love, so that you can have a deeper relationship with yourself. The goal is to not be in a place where you avoid sadness or grief. That's what makes you human. But this is not what makes you human. This is what makes us animalistic. I want to share with you what Imam Ghazali rahimahullah says about time management. And just listen to his words, right? He says, you should not neglect your time or use it haphazardly. On the contrary, you should bring yourself to account, structure your litanies and other practices during each day and night, and assign to each period a fixed and specific function. This is how to bring out the spiritual blessing, barakah, in each period. But if you leave yourself adrift, aimlessly wandering as cattle do, as animals do, not knowing how to occupy yourself at every moment, your time will be lost. It is nothing other than your life, and your life is the capital that you make use of to reach perpetual felicity in the proximity of God the Exalted. Each of your breaths is a priceless jewel, since each of them is irreplaceable and once gone can never be retrieved. Do not be like the deceived fools who are joyous because each day their wealth increases while their life shortens. What good is an increase in wealth when life grows ever shorter? Therefore, be joyous only for an increase in knowledge or in good works. For they are your two companions who will accompany you in your grave when your family, wealth, children, and friends stay behind. Imam Ghazali is giving us one mode of increase of barakah. He's saying you want to have blessing in your day, your life, then you got to structure your day. In the course of what he identifies as bringing structure in this text is not rooted in just simply you sit all day and engage in prayer and adhkar, but you go out. He continues in this, and if we have time, we'll get into it, where he talks about the importance of spending time with your loved ones. He talks about the importance of having a job, doing your job and working. He talks about the importance of bringing in particular what we call awrad, your wird, your daily litanies, adhkar, your prayer, Quran, so many different things that make you a whole person. One of the challenges that gets in the way when we're looking at this is that you are not simply just a body. You're not just a physical being. If anything, your physical being is simply just the vessel that holds what makes you uniquely you, which is the ruh, the soul that makes you human. So when you are thinking about how it is that your routine functions, all of you is connected to the rest of you. If you only sleep 3 hours a night for days in a row, why wouldn't you feel deflated in your prayer? If you eat garbage food consistently or don't eat at all or eat at random times of the day, why wouldn't you feel exhausted and devoid of energy? If you're in a space where you don't talk to people about your problems, you're carrying pain in your heart, irreconcilable emotion. The companions literally have an abundance of hadith where they're talking to the Prophet about what their life is like and the pains that they go through. You spend most of your day on this side of the bucket in pursuit of things that render all of this, your body, your heart, your mind, it's giving you indication as to the state that it's in. You pay attention to some of those signs. You make those choices. You get what I mean? So you start out with a blank slate that starts to recognize that it's not going to be the way that everybody else might do it. You have a physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual spirit to yourself. If you don't build in routine or you run yourself ragged, it's going to catch up. When I was in high school, I was training to play sports in college. As I'm sure you can tell, just look at how large of a human being I am, mashallah. I was working out 3 times a day sometimes. I had my own trainer. In my senior year, I got multiple concussions and I couldn't play sports anymore. That was the end of it. When I got to college, I went to NYU as an undergrad. I was in a place where in high school, I was exercising so much. And it was something that was just a part of my routine. My self-care was non-existent. It didn't need to be. I had the metabolism of a teenager who was also working out quite extensively. And when I got to college, I learned that Muslims don't really exercise. I try to find people to go to the gym with. People are like, well, where's the gym? And then we get to the gym and they just didn't know how to do anything. So I was like, okay. And I went through my undergrad, was still kind of engaged in whatever I did. But when I started working here, a lot of it just kind of went out the window. I got to a place where every aspect of my development just stopped. There was nothing going on. Throughout most of my 20s, I coasted off of what it was that I had built up as a routine in the early part of my 20s and the latter part of my teens. And when that started to wear off a few years into me working here in this job that many people would be like, that's a great job, mashallah, look at all the things that you do. It's still the same challenges of any other job. The majority of my 20s was spent with me getting sick all of the time. My weight would fluctuate constantly. I'd get very heavy. I'd get very light. There was one Ramadan, I lost 20 pounds. By the end of it, I was losing more than a pound a day. Not a big person. It came from someplace. And the hardest part was that I was surrounded by so many people, but I never felt more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. And I had this burdensome notion that said, I have to be there for everyone. I can't let anybody be there for me. So my physical wellness was out of the way. My emotional wellness was running on empty. My mental exhaustion was constantly out the window. And any sense of spiritual development was in a place where it just didn't happen. Towards the end of my 20s, I got an illness called shingles that usually people who are in their 70s get. You get shingles if you've ever had the chicken pox virus. It stays dormant in your nervous system. When you get to a low point of immunity and high point of stress, it reactivates as blisters on a nerve track. And so I woke up with blisters from the middle of my torso all the way to my back. I still have the scars from them. I went to the doctor to figure out what this thing was. They saw it and they said, "That's herpes." And I said, "No, it's not." And they're like, "No, not that kind of herpes." And I said, "Then what kind of herpes is it?" Then they explained it to me. And they said, "You have shingles. And what is going to happen is it's going to feel like you're going to have a lot of pain. Like somebody's rubbing a hot iron on your body as they're stabbing you again. Because it's on your nerves. Even the slightest kind of movement of clothing erupts you now in this physical pain." I had to quarantine until these blisters popped because the liquid in it was contagious. I went to my parents' house and stayed in a bedroom by myself. And one night I opened up a laptop, started to check email, and I got an email from a student here who told me earlier that morning her Muslim boyfriend had grabbed her in the Silver Building by the straps of her book bag, threw her against a wall, and had a public safety officer not intervened, she didn't know what would have happened. And I read her letter. I closed my laptop. I went downstairs to my parents' living room where my mother was watching TV. I put my head in my mother's lap and I just cried. It wasn't that I didn't have the ability to help this young person. I couldn't support her or care that she needed provided to her, so it wasn't taking care of me. And literally my body imploded on itself, saying, "You need to wake up because you're running on empty." I went through my 30s willing to stand up to certain parts of habits that I built in myself that were so stupid. Changing what I eat, exercising more regularly again, not doing anything drastic, but going to a place that had balance to it, recognizing that all of me is connected to the rest of me. This is how Allah has made us. And there's only so long that you can compensate for not weakness, but just an absence of replenishment in some sphere of your existence. And so if your physical wellness is not something you pay attention to, you can't pray that away. It's going to catch up to you. Just like if you're on top of your physical wellness, but you're not doing anything for your emotional, mental, spiritual wellness, it's going to catch up to you at some point. So to have a tradition that's about balance necessitates recognizing how do we interject balance into our routines. Your routine should look different from people who are not Muslim. You will have to make decisions that are different from what other people do, but you do not want to prioritize things that create that first column at the expense of the second column. We want to start to now think about ways that we can enhance it. You got to sit within yourself and take a moment and say, what are things that I'm not doing that I need to do on a regular basis? Why do I only go to certain spaces when there's a crisis? Why do I only turn to certain individuals? Why do I only engage in certain practice when my world is already heavy? As opposed to running in a way where the things that I know that are good for me, I do those things consistently so that I'm starting at a higher place. And then when reality hits, it doesn't knock me to the ground in a way that I don't know how to get back up. You get what I mean? So thinking about this purposefully, what I would love to do with each of you individually that I'm throwing out there is walk you through your daily, weekly routines. I had a student from Abu Dhabi here some years ago, and he came here And Abu Dhabi is not an easy school, right? It's hard in Abu Dhabi, isn't it? Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, mashallah. So it's not easy. They got to take 20% more classes than students at our other campuses. The J term was institutionalized because our Abu Dhabi students have to go to school more. You know, this kid came to New York for a semester and he sat with me a month and a half into it and is just in a state of distress. He thinks he's stupid, he lacks intelligence, he's not doing well. And we're talking. And I'm like, what's your day look like, man? He says, I wake up pretty late for my first class. I'm running behind and I'm in this like dense material based class. I then go to work because New York City is expensive. So he worked for the phonathon, which he said was mindless. He's reading off the scripts, asking people to donate. And he says they just keep hanging the phone up on me. Nobody wants to donate. Then he's back in class. He says he eats something. He goes through some mode of like routine as the night falls. At the gym, exercises, gets to the library now at probably about 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, sits there till 1 or 2 in the morning, staring aimlessly at a book, thinking everybody else can do work, but I'm not. And then he goes to bed at that time and wakes up. So what do you eat during this time? And I kid you not, he said to me, every day at least once, if not twice, he ate chicken and rice from a street cart. And I said, my man, you have a gallon of white sauce in your stomach. Why would you not feel exhausted? All we had to do was not shift his whole world. We had to make subtle changes in his routine. He wakes up not sleeping well. He is exhausted. He goes to class, which is mind-numbing. He goes to this job that he hates. It starts to impact his mood. He eats poor food. It's impacting his physical wellness. He goes to the gym as something that's refreshing, but he's already so depleted that his outlet, as best as it is that it's good for him, still adds more exhaustion. It's tiring to exercise. Then at the end of all of that tiredness, where he's missed prayers, he's not on top of them, because he's running around frantic, and he starts to feel guilty that he's missing it, so his spiritual strength is also debilitated. He then tries to go and study, and then the self-talk inside of him is saying, you're so dumb, everybody else can focus, you can't focus. Why would this guy have the ability to focus at that point in the night? How does that routine make any sense? Does it make sense? When you hear it out loud, does it make sense? Some of you do the same nonsense, right? Why does it make sense for you? So what do? I say, hey man, stop drinking white sauce like it's water. Let's change up some of what you eat. Just little things. Drink more water. It's good for you. Instead of going to that library late at night, you go to the gym, go to sleep. You sleep 6, 7 hours, 8 hours, you wake up, and then you study at that time. Fajr comes in, you don't feel bad about missing Fajr, and then you stay awake at Fajr. And then you start to read, you study then, you go to class, you're able to just adjust slightly. All we did was change his routine by having him drink more water, eat less chicken and rice, and then instead of studying at night, he studied during the daytime. At the end of the semester, he had an A in every class. But it wasn't that he had an A in every class. He had a sense of self-esteem back. He was able to overcome that sense of just misery that I'm a terrible person. Your day as a Muslim starts at the time that the sun rises. There's immense benefit in what we have. Our days are rooted in a relationship elementally to the world around us. We are taught to look into the sky. We are taught to relate to things. You make wudu with water. You have a relationship to it. determine the times of your prayer based off of a cyclical pattern of the sun. You don't live in a box where you just stare at the floor all the time, but you take from nature around you. You want a secret to how it is you can increase barakah? The people who make use of the time around Fajr, they have categorical difference in their routine. It is immensely different. I've had students come to this school that they will pray Fajr all together, stay awake. They have gotten into med schools, law schools. They have memorized the whole Quran while they're in college. And they're also just genuinely happy, content people. They're balanced. They're not miserable. They don't mistreat people. They're not in a state where the world is overwhelming. You want to, a comfortable thing that I'm saying to all of you, as different as you are from each other, you want to wake up in the morning and stay up. Which means the night before, your sleep has to start at an hour that makes sense. Does that make sense? What am I saying? Somebody tell me. Huh? Sleep early. What else? Like sleep. You gotta sleep. If we went around and asked people how much sleep they get normally in a row, not like chunks and pockets that you're falling asleep in. If you, right now, I'm looking in this room, right? None of you are probably older than me, right? If you're falling asleep in the middle of the day, that's a bad sign. That means something is wrong. It doesn't matter how boring the professor is. If you are falling asleep in the middle of the day, that means you're not getting enough rest. So you get to a place where this is something that allows for you to get to this. You give yourself some time gradually. There's a barakah in Fajr. There's also an absence of barakah in the sleep that comes after Fajr. There's devoid of blessing. So you try to get someplace between 6 to 8 hours. You got to know yourself enough. Any of you who thinks that you can go up for 3-4 hours a night consistently, you are kidding yourself. You're setting yourself up for the long term to hate yourself when you are 50, 60 years old. Most of you probably have family members who, may Allah grant them ease, have all kinds of ailments as they get older. They can't walk, they have cholesterol issues, heart problems, these kinds of things. It's not worth it. When you're not working to achieve just materialistic success, the standards that Allah has for you to have success are not as stringent as sometimes the world requires you to exhaust yourself in pursuit of their validation. Your God looks for a reason to accept from you, not for a reason to push you down. Do you get what I mean? So in your routine, you got to build in opportunity to take advantage of the time that's coming in after Fajr time. And so you set for yourself and you recognize, how do I know it's a priority? Look at what the rest of your day looks like prior to it. What are you doing at night that's going to keep you from waking up at Fajr time? Right? And sometimes we make bad decisions. My wife, when she was pregnant with my daughter, we went on a baby moon to Montreal. And I have like a very bad sweet tooth. I cut out sugars for a long time. And then in the pandemic, I like fell off the wagon hard. It was bad, man. But when we went to this baby moon, we went and watched Spider-Man in the movie theaters one night in downtown Montreal. We got out, it was like pretty late, and we're walking down the street, my like very pregnant wife and I, and then I grabbed her hand and ran through traffic with her. She's like, "What is wrong with you?" And we walked into a Cold Stone Creamery. I really like Cold Stone. I got cake and shake milkshake, which if any of you have ever drank a cake and shake milkshake, it is probably the most amazing thing you'll ever eat. They not only take cake and batter ice cream, but they take actual pieces of cake and then blend it into the cake, right? And it's so good. I drank this thing at midnight. And I didn't drink like a little one. I drank a big one. By the time we got to the hotel, it's now 1 o'clock in the morning, and we wake up to pray Fajr, and it's probably like the most equivalent of a halal hangover. I have no idea what's going on. I'm stumbling all over myself. You don't want to have self-deprecating language that, Allah doesn't want you to. Why would God not want you to pray Fajr? What a dumb thing to say. What kind of depiction of the divine do you have if you feel like you can tell somebody that? Of course Allah wants you to pray Fajr. Why wouldn't He want you to pray Fajr? What kept me from being present in my Fajr prayer was that I drank about a bag of sugar the night before. And my body is responding to it. You see what I mean? All of you is connected to the rest of you. I just want to really quickly, before we break for Maghrib, a few other things. In the course of this routine now, you need to have wellness that's in all of these things. What Imam Ghazali is positing is that you build structure, not to a point of paranoia, but you know what you're going to do. So when you're starting out the day, you bring in moments of reflection and solitude. What do you want to get done today? What do you want to achieve? And at the end of the day, you look back. It doesn't have to be like grandeur types of things, but just things as simple as, I want to do my laundry. I want to get groceries for the house. I'm going to cook meals for the rest of it, right? In this, you have to build some moments of reflection on a weekly basis. You have to have outlets that allow for you to recenter and replenish yourself. Otherwise, you're just going to run on empty and be exhausted constantly. You got to have some time that you make to engage with your friendships and relationships. Most of what creates high levels of stress for all of us are going to be feelings of loneliness, feelings of just being by ourselves. It's really hard. It's really heavy. All of these things that you're writing here, you just put down for yourself the ideal circumstance. And then you're working towards that strategically. You do it gradually and shift things gradually. You allow for yourself to have some more of that. Things that take away from barakah are going to be things that you want to avoid. Your spirituality is conditioned upon your ability to embrace your ability to choose. You are making a choice. You have to firmly admit that. You are choosing every moment that you use your time, how you're going to use it. So use it for things that are not at the expense of your heart, but make those decisions through your heart. You see what I mean? So in this, there's got to be a self-care strategy. If I asked each of you individually, how do you take care of your heart? You're going to say, most of you, I don't know. And if I say to you, why don't you go to the gym? I wake up, I pray Fajr, I go to the gym for about an hour, hour and a half, and then read Quran, spend time with my kids, my wife, get them to school, do what I need to do. I'm not running in a state of anxiety. You can do these things. But if in your head you're going to tell yourself, I don't have time, what are you really telling yourself? That taking care of yourself is not important? You see what I mean? You don't want to get in a jumble the way some people would. I had students that came to me and said, I don't know how to really adapt to this schedule. It's new. You got to have self-love. You got to be forgiving and compassionate towards yourself. You came from a different country, right? Yeah. Where are you from?
Senegal.
Senegal. And where do you go to school?
United Arab Emirates.
And have you ever lived in New York before?
I did, yeah.
You did? No, man, you should say no. So let's say he did not, right? How's he going to know how to live in New York until he's lived in New York? Getting adjusted to time zones, getting adjusted to new environments, all kinds of things. You got to be reasonable with yourself. In the moments where exhaustion sets in and this kind of thing is not built into your routine, you're going to get to a place where it's going to leave the door open for Shaitan to have you hate on yourself quite deeply. You get what I'm saying? Okay, we didn't get through all the things that I want to get through. I don't want us to delay Maghrib too much. I don't think we're going to continue after Maghrib. right? But just a couple of things really quickly. Maybe we'll pick up on this. You want to inventory where you're at right now. If I want to get here, I have to know where I stand in relation to it. So all you want to do for the next week is just really spend time with yourself. Like, what are you doing during your day? So at the end of the night, like, write it down in a notebook so you have accountability to it. What did I actually spend my time doing? I literally, when I went through that time period that got me the shingles, I wasn't eating food at all, like, well. I would take long showers in the morning because it was the only place I felt rest. Like, literally all the stress was just coming out. But then I'd be late to everything in the morning. I would spend 40 minutes in front of a closet trying to figure out what to wear because everything was now an anxiety, right? Nobody cares what I wear, right? You don't go home at night and you're like, man, what was Khalid Latif wearing today? What was wrong with me? You know, I wear a lot of the same clothes every day. And that's just because I don't have to really think about it as much. But when I was, it was ruining my life. So you spend some time just thinking out, like, what are you actively using in your routine? And then you make lists that are not like exhaustive. What are the things that you can prioritize? What are the things you can do for your self-care? What are decisions you're going to have to make? Because inevitably, when you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. So if you're saying yes to staying awake till 3 in the morning and then deciding to go to sleep, you are saying no to budget. You're saying it's not important. I'm not telling you that you should stay up till 3 in the morning, but if you're going to stay up till 3 in the morning, you might as well just stay up till 5 in the morning and just pray and go back to sleep at that point, right? At least you're not going to wake up devoid of its presence. And you don't want to numb yourself to a place where remorse and guilt has you become indifferent towards something that's meant to be a means of kind of celestial upliftment. Does that make sense? That you hate on yourself so much for missing it so often that you have dissonance that says, well, I don't even have to pray it to begin. Because it's easier than to kind of turn away from it, right? Now, I just want you to pay attention to the self-care part. What do you really do for your self-care in the course of the week? What's really going on there for your overall wellness strategy? You start to plug it in. I use my Google Calendar quite effectively. That's how I keep a track of things. You got to keep a track of stuff for yourself as well. And you start to create some opportunities for development. Okay, I'm going to put my email address up here in case people want to actually discuss this more in detail. The things that we didn't get to that maybe we'll do at a later time. We didn't talk about lavu, which is just like futility, right? You're gonna find that just a lot of time that you spend. I said this to my wife yesterday. I'm gonna say it to you. I said to my wife, I looked through my phone. You know how your phone tells you how much time you spend on apps? I'm not even gonna tell you how much time I've spent on YouTube in the last month. My wife said, what do you even watch when you watch it? I'm like, I don't even know. It's so ridiculous. And she's a good person. And she tried to make me feel better. And she's like, no, you know, you're probably just like listening to things that are, you know, I'm like, no, I'm watching like dumb stuff. It's so dumb the things that, you know? But level is an important thing for us to think out in that inventorying. So what I would do is you're looking at your routine and create a chart. And I'd say, here's Kaya, here is Shav, like here's what's bad, here's what's good. And here in the middle, you know, what is lovely, what's futile. Like what is just pointless, right? That's just time that I'm spending in pursuit of what? Do you know what I mean? And then muhasabah is like literally taking hisab of yourself. So you want to have a practice in your reflection in solitude. You're waking up in the morning or at the end of the day, or every few days, right? Like, what am I trying to get done? Or what did I get done? You know? And this is where that difficult conversation is. Because part of it is going to be like, I spent 2 hours gossiping about somebody's thing. I spent an hour prolonging a fight that really had nothing to do other than my ego wanting to win. You don't want to do that to yourself or to anybody else, right? It's also, though, going to be about recognizing, hey, you know what? Today, I did go to volunteer. I did go to the halakha. I did pass out food to people who are homeless. And I still was able to get done all the things I need to get done. You see what I mean? You start to recognize as you pay attention that you actually have a lot more capacity, right? So to recap, you say, I don't have time. You're basically saying it's not important to me. And that self-talk is going to build itself up. So if you've told yourself for a long period of time that you don't have time to take care of your heart, you have to shift that talk and say that I do have time. It is important. I have to prioritize. I'm going to figure out a way to get to the prayer room. I'm going to figure out a way to call up people and say, hey, let's go out to eat. Or say, let's study together so I don't have to do things by myself, right? I'm going to figure out a way to have like a regular routine of physical wellness, emotional wellness, spiritual wellness, mental wellness. And then I start to design my life because I don't want anybody else to design. Okay, so really quick, we're going to start all of our regular halakas from next week. We'll send out emails about that in the coming week. Inshallah, sign up for them, build them into your routine. There'll be things happening here most nights, as well as things happening, on weekends during the course. We'll have some one-on-one opportunities. We're going to start doing iftars here on Monday nights. We used to do iftars Mondays and Thursdays. We're going to start out with Mondays to see how that goes. I encourage you all to fast if you can. Right? It's a really great exercise to engage in. I fast on Mondays and Thursdays, alhamdulillah. In the days that I fast, I'm categorically more focused than the days that I'm not fasting. It's really remarkable, just what kind of experience that is. And then as it goes, depending on the turnout, we will have probably add in like the middle days of the month as well. So we want people to start building relationships to these practices. Right? So the holocaust will happen. We'll have iftar. Also, you can join for all of it, whether you're fasting or not. Try to encourage you to fast if you can. What I'd love to have from this group as we're meeting on Mondays regularly is ways for us to kind of enhance the experience, right? How do we start leaning on each other, for suhoor, for us to build like relationships with some of these other things that we have going on. That we take some of what we discuss here, we create accountability with others, so we're kind of building together and growing together. You know what I mean? So it's not just we come and we sit and then we have a whole week and there's no real interaction with each other. Sheikh Faz is going to be doing a program on Thursday night. Instead of his regular halakha, he's going to be doing a program for the Arba'in Muharram, and that's going to be in room 914 of the building next door. And other than that, we're going to have Jummah on Friday in the afternoon. And I don't believe there's like too many other programs that are going on. For any of our students that are here, are there anything that happened that you know of that's taking place this week? You want to tell people about? Yes, no. Yeah.
I think there is a balloon pudding Wednesday.
We're going to do volunteering through the IC. So we feed homeless people in the area. About 500 people twice a week we were doing it. We do it this Wednesday. And then inshallah we'll start again on Fridays also. So if you want to join on Wednesday to help, please do. We get prepackaged food that we kind of put together and we distribute in the area. Okay, great. So we're going to pray in 2 minutes. People want to make wudu, and we'll see everybody next Monday. Assalamu alaikum.